For ballers, listen. In order to keep the show going, we need the help of some great advertisers. But in order to get them, we need to learn a little bit more about you. So if you could, please go on out to podsurvey.com/solid-verbal. That is podsurvey.com/solid-verbal. And take a quick anonymous survey that'll help us get to know you a little better. That way we could show advertisers how great our verballers are. Plus, if you complete the survey, you can enter for a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. Terms and conditions do apply. Again, that is podsurvey.com/solid-verbal. We appreciate your help. Thank you.
Welcome to the Solid Verbal. The Solid Verbal.
Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
I've heard so many players say, well, I want to be happy. You want to be happy for a day? Eat a steak.
It's that woo-woo!
And now, Dan and Ty.
Welcome back to the Solid Verbal Boys and Girls. My name is Ty Hildebrand. Joining me as always over there in snowy, in wintry, and fatherly New York City, my man Dan Rubenstein. Sir, how are you?
I gotta tell you, Ty, after having, and by having, I mean wife having a baby.
Yeah.
I've never slept better.
Yeah? Is that true?
Just deep, uninterrupted. Yeah, it's not true at all. Deep, uninterrupted, no spit up, no nothing, no. I call the solid baby now Fussell Westbrook.
Okay.
Just because that's the only entertaining thing at 3:47 a.m.
Right.
But I am otherwise extremely excited, especially because today's show actually is related to the solid baby, and I swear, I apologize for this show jumping the shark once the solid baby was born. But the show that we are doing is actually a re-recording. So we're actually recording it on Wednesday, tell me what day it is, the 21st?
20th.
Wednesday the 20th. So we're actually recording. This is not us stapling together. I guess we could have done that.
We could have. We thought about it. I have the original audio from our first attempt at this, but maybe at some point we'll use that. For the reasons I'm guessing you're about to describe here.
Yes. So if you've downloaded the show, if you're looking at the show, if this is in your podcatcher of choice, you know that we are discussing the 19 most intriguing transactions, at least so far, of the offseason and the questions they beget.
Yes.
I think that's a good word
what I'm trying to say. That was very old English of you, Dan.
Thank you. And so we have that list in front of us. We powered through, 8, 9 and a half of these.
Let me look here. I feel like we got up to like number 10.
Right.
And we get to number 10 and you're like, hey, hold on a second. I just got to talk to Jody about something. Which isn't uncommon.
No.
As we're doing a show.
Yeah.
But then you just casually come back and you're like, yeah, I think we got to go to the hospital now.
I think we got to go. It was a situation where Jody and I was out running some errand, and she texted me. She's like, I think I just had a couple of contractions. I'm like, okay. And you're not supposed to go to the hospital unless they're really sort of tight together. I think 5 minutes apart, start to start.
Yeah, let's do the full anatomy lesson here.
And so she called her doctor, and her doctor was like, you probably don't need to, but why don't you guys just go into the hospital just in case? And so that at that point, Jody was like, yeah, we gotta go. And I was like, okay, Ty, gotta go.
Yeah, no, it was at that point clear where your priorities were. I must admit, though, there was at least a very small part of me that was hoping you would be tasked with delivering the baby while we were recording the podcast.
It would have been cool to be like, all right, Ty, I'm just going to call in and I'm going to do play-by-play in the Uber on the way to the Upper East Side from Brooklyn. And just like, anyway, Ty, back to Mack Brown. There's a lot to like about the hire, and as like Jody is stink-eyeing me.
Yeah, right.
So we didn't end up doing that. She didn't end up going into labor until the following day, but this is the final conclusion of the 19 most intriguing transactions of the young offseason and the questions they beget.
100% true story there.
Yeah.
I have the audio. At some point we'll find a way to staple it to something else that we're doing. But suffice to say, Dan, this show has had a little extra time in the oven. We've had a chance to ripen this show appropriately, add some personality to it. We did a show before the start of the 2018 season where we talked about the 19 most pivotal people. And I've had this strange affliction for the number 19 as a scoring object in college football games. Whenever someone finishes with 19 points, I don't know. I just find that amusing. So as the official...
It's your Jim Carrey number 23.
That's right. As the official favorite prime number of the Solid Verbal, number 19 is just finding a way to root itself in all of our content, both preseason, during the season, and otherwise. And so today...
And it's 2019.
And 2019, sure. So we got a lot of 19 things going on. Transactions in the offseason, what it means moving forward. Yeah, so just a lot of number 19 things going on here at Solid Verbal headquarters. Today we're talking about the 19 most important, most influential, you name it, transactions that have transpired here over the offseason. Now, I should add, you put this list together starting from number 19 all the way down through number 1.
Early blame.
We're gonna count these down. I do take issue with some of where you put these. Should I consider this a ranking of any sort?
I mean, this is where my head was at in late January, so I'm going to stay loyal to late January, and we're going to roll with this order. And you take issue with what you take issue with, for sure.
Okay, well, before we go any further, don't forget you can find us at solidverbal.com. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. There's also a subreddit started by Verballers for Verballers at reddit.com/r/solidverbal. You can also sign up for our newsletter. I know we keep saying it. Trust me when I say we mean it. There will be a bunch of fun things forthcoming over the next couple days and weeks and months here in the off season. So the best way to stay plugged into all of our news is to go on out to solidverbal.com, fill out the big Verballers wanted form. You can't miss it on the homepage, and that'll get you signed up for our newsletter, the appropriately named Newsletter of Intent.
All true.
And finally, subscribe to the show if you haven't already. If you like college football, we'll be with you all off season. You can find us any number of different ways in either podcast form or out on Spotify, Stitcher, some of the other streaming services. Just search for the Solid Verbal, whatever you use to listen to your shows. You can find us there as well.
All true. I agree.
All right, Dan. So we don't have a defined sound to signify moving from one item on your list to another. And what we did the first time around is I was really just pulling things out here on the soundboard, trying to match up sound clips with what I thought was interesting.
Right.
Just from an audio standpoint. So the first thing here that I wanted to bring up as we talk about number 19.
Ooh.
Yeah. You know what that is. That's the transfer portal, Dan.
Yes.
The transfer portal has clearly seen a new level of acclaim, a new level of celebrity this offseason. And we'll start with your number 19, emphasize your, Penn State losing a ton of players to transfer. What do you mean? What are you feeling when you say that, Dan?
My meaning is that they lost, 6, 7, 8 players, which every program as agency has shifted at least in the direction of players, and players are further able to showcase themselves for a school on the same level, a bigger level, a smaller level, that everybody's going through the transfer thing. But Penn State, for whatever reason, seems to, among college football's powers, be hit a little bit harder. And these are players of varying, contribution. But it's, Jajuan Johnson was, I guess, the biggest. I don't know. He just decided he's going to play as a grad transfer for Oregon, and he had some drops issues this past season.
Let me tell you, sir, he's going to add a dozen to a dozen and a half drops to your passing game out there.
That's fine.
Yeah.
It's not mine. Let me be clear. I'm not the offensive coordinator. But whether it's, let's see, Isaiah Humphries went from Penn State to Cal, Aaron Monroe. I don't believe he has signed with anybody. Mark Allen. I'm seeing Irvin Charles, Brandon Polk. So there are some names here that were former blue chip guys. Cam Sullivan-Brown, Danny Dalton went over to BC, so stayed in the relative Northeast.
Not Darren Dalton.
Not Darren Dalton. But here's my question to you, Ty, because I know you take some issue with this. Is at this point, I wouldn't even go as far as saying alarming, but hefty number, all things considered. Does depth become a concern without Trace McSorley and a pretty tough October, and then they go to Ohio State later on?
Well, okay. Depth is always a concern, but it's not as much of a concern now because Penn State has recruited really, really well. Does not help to lose this kind of talent, to have it walking out the door. We've talked ad nauseum about how I'm not really all that concerned about it. I think if you've got a bunch of guys transferring, it indicates more talent up and down in your depth chart. Sure. It's also easier to transfer. So for as bad as it might feel and seem in the short term, I think longer term, it may not be as ominous for the state of the program. So depth is always a concern. They've recruited well. I think they'll be okay there. But the bigger concern is Trace McSorley. You know, you asked the question, is depth a concern without Trace? Well, depth is always a concern, but separate from Trace. Trace is what I'm most concerned about.
I like that first name basis you guys are on. Yeah,
it is. You know, we know each other. I'm always concerned about that quarterback spot. And especially when you've had a guy like Trace McSorley, who has so clearly been the lifeblood of your program the last 3 years. Where they go, how they do, whether it's Sean Clifford or Tommy Stevens, or if they find another solution somewhere, we're just going to have to wait and see. But suffice to say, it's not going to be the same Penn State offense without Trace. So yeah, that element of this absolutely does concern me.
You could say Penn State is without a Trace.
Boom, boom, boom.
I'm a dad now. I can make those kinds of remarks. Number 18, play me a sound.
Pain. That's it.
Okay, there you go.
Pain.
I think this is appropriate.
Shout out Andre Brower. And this one I have is Texas and their quarterback room thinning out without Shane Buechele, who has moved on to SMU. Cameron Rising, I think, made his way to Utah to fill in their quarterback room. And Texas still has, I think, a blue chip from the last recruiting class, and they brought in one or two in this class, so not a ton of experience behind Sam Ehlinger. And so the question that this then gives me, brings up in my mind, is he enough of a standout with everything they lost? And I think they even lost more defense than offense, but they're, in terms of returning production, however much you value that metric, Texas is not in a great place, especially out wide with Colin Johnson and little Jordan Humphrey gone. Is he enough of a standout to be there all everything, high usage, whenever they need a tough yard once again? I know Keontae Ingram had a nice year last year later on, but is he that all-encompassing star that he will once again get them to double-digit wins?
See, I would hesitate, again, like with the previous question, to lump two of the things you said together.
Okay.
And that would be standout and high usage. I think when healthy, Sam Ehlinger is every bit of that standout player.
Okay.
He was...
Healthy is relative, though.
Healthy is relative, but he was the team leader in rushing touchdowns this past year. He had 16 rushing touchdowns.
Was great.
The two guys above him who had more yardage only had 3 touchdowns apiece. So clearly they leaned on Sam Ehlinger. They need to find a way, Tom Herman does, to lean a little bit more on that running game, to get more out of it, because the high usage part of this equation, I think, is going to be pretty key. They need to keep him upright. He's a kid with a bit of an injured past on the football field. You got to find a way to keep him upright, and I just don't think you can keep running him with such regularity and expect that he's going to be bulletproof in the 2019 season.
It's how do you prevent from going full JT Barrett? Essentially,
right,
with Sam Ehlinger.
Yes.
And he is going to be behind a pretty inexperienced line as it relates to where they were last year.
Just got to find a way to keep him healthy. He's a good player. I love watching him play. They need to find a way to keep him healthy and at least distribute the offense around a little bit more.
Yeah, and a pretty crazy new look Big 12, by the way. So you have Kansas, Kansas State, West Virginia, Texas Tech, all with new
We're
hires.
going to talk about all of those teams. Let's move on.
Yes.
To number
17.
17.
Guess who just got murdered?
Oh, I like the double Brooklyn Nine-Nine, though.
Thank you. You've got here the bottom of the Big Ten head coaches sticking around. And in particular, you call out Lovie Smith at Illinois, Chris Ash of Rutgers. Let me ask you this, Dan. You look at the situations on both fronts.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see a path forward, a so-called way out for either of those two guys, Lovie at Illinois or Ash at Rutgers? Is there a path out, a path forward?
Yeah, I think Lovie Smith has a much clearer one, although I think he just hired his son which hopefully that works out. It's not anything I'm a huge fan of. It's a higher risk in keeping a staff together when there's double family involved. But offensively, they did some interesting things last year. They're in the West, right? So there's not like a situation where Illinois has to go through superpower after superpower after superpower, and recruiting well enough. The level of talent has increased from where it was just a year or two ago. I'm looking at the road schedule right now. UConn.
It's not a bad schedule.
No, at UConn, at Minnesota, at Purdue, at Michigan State, at Iowa. It's a little bit tougher at the back end, and they have Michigan and Wisconsin in consecutive weeks, both at home. But could they'll go 4-8? Could they get to 5-6 and flirty? I don't know.
It's doable.
It's a lot closer than the disaster in Piscataway.
Yeah, and I guess the question is, when we talk about a path forward, a way out, whatever you want to use, I think at least for Illinois, because I looked at the schedule, and there might be some immediate chance of a little bit more optimism.
Right.
But still, both teams bottom 2 in the Big Ten in recruiting rankings for 2019. Illinois had a really small class.
Had a couple blue chips, though.
Couple blue chips.
Yeah.
A couple blue chips. But they need to start spinning some of that talent into gold in order to bring this program up a notch or two. And
drive for 6.
I don't know. I'm skeptical that happens in the near term.
It's, again, a lot closer to they're getting a lot closer to the road. Do you remember playing, God, what game was it where you could just go completely off-road? Mario Kart, where you're just driving the wrong direction and you need to be picked up and drop at. I think Illinois is at least, even if they're going to come in, 7th or 8th place, they're at least facing the right direction, and they don't need the cloud picker-upper.
The cloud picker-upper,
right?
Yeah. I think that's
Rutgers is perennially your dad playing Mario Kart. That's exactly where I see them. Number 16? Woo!
All right. Number 16, Dan. What do we got?
Lincoln Reilly, who's had a pretty nice couple of years at Oklahoma.
He's done well for himself, yeah.
He and the Sooners land Jalen Hurts. They hire Alex Grinch, and they bring in what appears to be the best modern Oklahoma recruiting class, highlighted by, I believe, the best receiver in the country, certainly the best receiving class, pass-catching class in the country. I think that in and of itself is an enormous story, what Oklahoma has been able to do, capitalizing, and Brandon Huffman talked about it on a recruiting show.
Yeah.
But at this point, my bigger question would be, is Oklahoma's offense enough of a template at this point, a plug-and-play situation, to assume Jalen Hurts just dominates?
No.
They plug him in, and he's there.
I don't think so. I take issue with the word template, though, because of what we saw this past season from Lincoln Riley. When I think template, I think opening up Microsoft Word, save as, and you've got the format for your resume.
Oh, no, that's not what I mean.
Just put your stuff in. But when I think of Lincoln Riley and what he did this year, I think more of a Lego set where you can piece it together however you want. Not everyone can put it together in a manner that looks organized and exciting, but he has seemingly found a way to do that both years on campus now. None more so than this past year with Kyler Murray and some of the injuries he had to face. This is clearly someone who knows how to assemble the pieces. He's a brilliant offensive mind. And my guess is that he's going to continue to have a lot of success at Oklahoma, unless Lincoln reshuffles the deck a little bit here and tries to offload some of that responsibility onto his running backs. I don't think it's an assumption that Jalen Hurts is going to come in and just automatically shine from the get-go.
I'm going to run through Oklahoma's schedule. Stop me when we get to a defense that you're particularly worried about with Oklahoma. Houston, South Dakota, UCLA, Texas Tech, Kansas, Texas. You can stop me there. That's fine. They replace a lot, though, especially up front. West Virginia, Kansas State, Iowa State. Interesting, but nothing crazy. Baylor, TCU. Good defense.
Maybe TCU.
Yeah. And Oklahoma State. Bedlam.
Okay.
So even if Jalen Hurts is clearly not Kyler Murray or Baker Mayfield, the context is pretty good. It's pretty good.
Clemson in the playoff is probably your answer.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right.
I like the fact that they've got a seasoned veteran who they can plug in at quarterback while they're trying to bring along Spencer Rattler.
Mm-hmm.
I like that situation.
And he's got two really good running backs. I think he's going to be very good, but not capital G great.
All right, moving on to number 15.
Oh, come on.
That's the little guy, Dan.
Yeah, that's the solid baby.
I apologize in advance for this one, but I just couldn't help myself.
That's fine. You don't have a drop of Jody with an eye, so that's the closest you're going to get, because number 15 is Michigan adding potentially a modern offense with the hiring of Josh Gaddis, although they do lose a couple of key defensive coaches, namely Greg Madison, who becomes the new defensive coordinator at Ohio State. And the question that I have based on this is much more of the offense than the defense. Will Michigan on offense thrive, particularly in the back half of their schedule, after they have that sort of rom-com moment where they're going through changes and they're getting a makeover, and oh my God, you look so good in a bubble screen. Oh my gosh, you look so good in jet action going deep. Who knew once you took the glasses off that you could spread the ball around?
Right.
When Michigan gets to October, I have the schedule in front of me right now.
Yes, let's hear it.
When Michigan gets to October, they have Iowa, who they've struggled with recently. But then later on, it's at Penn State and Notre Dame in consecutive weeks. Okay. At Maryland, which feels incredibly trappy, between Notre Dame at home and Michigan State at home. They go to College Park and then at Indiana, and then they finish in Ann Arbor against Ohio State. So I would say a pretty challenging back half. So good that they get the sort of runway to get into a rhythm with their supposed new look modernized offense.
I just want to apologize because the 1-star reviews we're going to get because of that sound clip. That's my fault right there.
Oh, that's okay. It was worth it.
I am enamored with the idea of Jim Harbaugh turning Michigan around, and he's already turned them around. He's a fabulous coach.
Sure.
But I'm enamored with the idea of him turning them into this superpower. And he's got the players. Sure, he's lost some of his coaching staff, but Michigan's ultimately going to be just fine. They're going to be a very tough out in the Big Ten. But something about what we saw last year, their inability to get over the hump when it was there for them,
right,
left me a bit shaken.
I think that's reasonable. And it appears they lose Chris Evans, who was the presumed starter at running back. They're pretty shallow at running back, and I wonder how that informs just how they move the ball. If they're going to rely so much on ground power when they don't really have that guy to depend on like they've been able to these past couple of years with Karan Higdon.
Sure. The thing that I would point to with Michigan is, as you went through the schedule, the schedule has plenty of killer, but just enough filler.
Sure.
And enough of a mix of home and away where there's appropriate buffer in there. And there aren't a whole lot of stretches in there where you look at it and say, wow, that's a real murderer's row.
I would say that back half, though. The front half they host Army, and Army loses their defensive coordinator and Jay Hobson, who did a pretty good job. And they travel to Madison after 2 weeks of less than challenging opponents. So I think it is like a good middle school dance, Ty. There is that appropriate buffer in there.
It's done well. I root for
Hit me
Michigan.
number 14.
Number 14.
Borderline erotic. Borderline erotic.
All right, Dan, your boy Justin Herbert, he is coming back. He had interest from the NFL. He could have gone. Yep. By mere fact of him staying, Oregon, I think, is very much a contender in the Pac-12 for this coming season. Where do you stand on your Oregon Ducks and how Justin Herbert sticking around will influence their 2019 campaign?
It's a good roster around him on offense. Outside of some receiver issues, they hired a new receivers coach, and Dylan Mitchell decided to leave early, and maybe it's a fresh start for everybody. You mentioned Jajuan Johnson and how you're a skeptic of his ability to come in and
to put it nicely, I am a skeptic.
Yes. He was still 2 years ago, he was an impressive weapon when he wasn't counted on as much, when he was like the number 2.5 guy, right?
When he caught a game-winning touchdown against Iowa, yes. Yes, the world was on his side, but you drop a couple passes in key situations, that tends to turn the tide pretty quickly.
Yeah. My my curiosity, is he closer to Matt Barkley or Baker Mayfield in coming back for that senior year? He has an incredible offensive line in front of him, like Baker Mayfield did. His running backs from last year Tony Brooks-James is gone, but he didn't really contribute. And so they have these young running backs who are pretty good. And then they bring in some good receivers in this recruiting class. Hard to fully count on them to contribute a ton. I think it's a good decision. This past year was the year given the schedule. And I imagine this coming year...
Tough schedule. Really tough road schedule.
It's a tough schedule, opening in Arlington against Auburn and then having Stanford and Washington on the road as well in the North. It's tough. There's no way around it. I imagine this year they win one game that they should have won last year and, maybe finish 9-3. But having Justin Herbert, who for all of the NFL potential and acclaim, was not one of the best dozen or so quarterbacks in the country, I think. I don't think that was
I think that's fair
for debate last year.
No, that's fair.
He himself has a lot to prove to not end up in the why did he come back again conversation that we could be having by week 7 or 8.
Okay. That seems fair. I actually think that this should be ranked a little bit higher on the list. I think this is going to be a big time story that we have.
It's interesting,
follow. Yeah, because having that kind of veteran quarterback leadership, high level quarterback leadership early on in the season, a lot of times that's the kind of thing that really pays serious dividends in the early part of the year. To have that experience, it's a big deal.
Are you so on your personal needle? And I apologize for bringing up your personal needle.
Yes.
Is it wavering in the Matt Barkley or the Baker Mayfield direction?
Oregon's recruited so well. I mean, there's a
really nice class coming in.
There's a good roster around him. I'll go more in the Baker Mayfield side.
Okay. Not a lot, but trending.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to Ole Miss. I know I played the sound already, but I'm going to play it again. Ole Miss is trying to figure itself out on both the offensive and defensive sides of the ball, Dan. So naturally, what has Matt Luke done?
Hired huge names to run both his offense and defense. He hired Rich Rodriguez, who has not been a coordinator in quite some time, but has, one of the best modern offensive minds to run the offense for Ole Miss and Oxford, and Mike McIntyre to run the defense, who has been a coordinator relatively recently, did a decent enough job at Duke, and is certainly a big name, has coached in Oxford, is responsible, as people will be very quick to point out, for bringing Patrick Willis to Oxford, and has name cachet, especially in the South. To what extent, I don't know. I'm doubting it works because there seems to be too many hurdles at this point in the SEC West to make a dent with just interesting coaches when the talent certainly doesn't appear to be there.
Yeah. It's a tough side of the SEC, isn't it?
It's a tough draw, especially with Mississippi State recruiting as well as they have. And I know Ole Miss put together a pretty nice class, all things considered, this year.
Yeah.
But moving on to a new quarterback, with Alabama getting stronger and stronger and bringing back a Heisman contender, Texas A&M only getting stronger, LSU, I think, surprised a lot of people, ourselves included, with the step they took forward this past year against a lot of winning teams on their schedule. It's a tough ask for them to turn things around pretty quickly.
It's a tough ask to be in the SEC West because no matter how realistic, there's got to be that constant impulse to want to be Alabama or to try to compare yourself to Alabama, if only so you can get the hell out of your side of the conference.
Right.
And as we've talked about time and time again on this show, it has driven not just the SEC, but the rest of college football crazy. So We'll see. I hope it works for him, but we'll see.
It'd be entertaining if it did. If they were a team that lost a bunch of games 44-41, it's a success. Probably not for Mike McIntyre, but it's a success.
All right. Moving on to number 12.
The Yakos. Home Dog of the Week.
You've got here, Jeff Brom staying at Purdue for quote unquote Jeff Bezos money, Dan.
Yeah. A lot has transpired with Jeff Bezos' life, by the way.
A lot's gone on
this episode initially.
Since we did the last show. Yeah. What does this mean for college football? the fact that Jeff Brom would stay at a place like Purdue. He would decide not to go back to his alma mater.
I don't like your tone, by the way. I like Purdue, a place like Purdue.
You can't deny the fact that it was the underdog story for Purdue to hold on to him.
It was unexpected, definitely.
What does it mean for the Big Ten, for Purdue as a program, given the fact that they were able to hold on to Jeff Brom? And also, does more money mean more problems? Does it mean less patience with a really difficult first half of the schedule for Purdue?
It is. It really is. I almost feel like when I looked at the contract, and the contract is only as meaningful as another school's ability to pay it out. But if Jeff Brom is incredible this year, I still don't think he's going to be at Purdue for very long. But I also think it's an uphill battle for Jeff Brom to be incredible at Purdue this year. Opening up, he has, I think they're at Nevada.
Yeah, here's the schedule. At Nevada, Vandy at home, TCU at home, Minnesota at home. Then they go to Penn State, back home against Maryland, to Iowa, back home against Illinois, home against Nebraska, and then they close out on the road at Northwestern, on the road at Wisconsin, and back in West Lafayette for the Indiana Hoosiers. So not a horrible schedule, but we've got road games in there at Penn State, at Wisconsin, which is always a difficult place to play. Mm-hmm. And then, a non-conference game against TCU, against Vandy. Like, there are some tricky spots in there. Yeah.
Put some respect on TCU's name. Cheez-It Bowl champion.
Excuse me.
TCU. They missed the Michigan schools and they don't have Ohio State. It's relative to the rest of the Big Ten, a terrific schedule. It's just that first half with having Vandy, Nevada, TCU, it's 3 bowl teams, 4 bowl teams, 5 bowl teams starting out. It's a tough schedule, all things considered. I'm almost comparing it to when an NBA team, the cap goes up and they sign Evan Turner or Timothy Mozgov or something like that. Like, well, there's more money to play around with in the Big Ten. Let's throw some to keep our coach. And if he continues to be a 500-ish coach that you pay $5-6 million, that's a lot to saddle. That could set a program back. This is me looking at the glass half empty of it because I really do like Jeff Brom and what their ceiling is.
You're really squinting to find that half-empty glass.
It's still a lot of money. It is a lot of money. It's money paid to coaches who have succeeded on much bigger levels than just a big upset once. Yeah. It is a lot. This is also a team, bowl-wise, don't care that much, but they got murdered by Auburn.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll believe the less patience part of this question when I see it.
Sure.
Because I think Purdue is smart enough to know that they've got a really good coach in Jeff Brom, who I think they expected they were going to lose him to Louisville.
At least they weren't negotiating against nobody. At least they're not one of those schools, he says, remembering Mark Helfrich's extension.
Sure.
That they were not extending him because of a threat that didn't exist.
Yeah,
there was a very clear threat. And so I understand it, but it's a dice roll. I still think it's a dice roll.
Yeah, I think they will have him for as long as he's willing to stay. I think he's got the program going in a good direction. I think it'll continue to go in a good direction. Regardless of what the schedule says here, they'll still find a way to get to a bowl game because he's that kind of coach. And
$5-6 million expects more.
Yeah. Money for people, huh? Okay.
Yep.
Let's move on. Let's go to number 11.
It's a trap. It's a trap.
The Big 12 adding what you have listed here, Dan, as under the radar offensive minds. And in parentheses, you've got Matt Wells, you've got Neil Brown. Matt Wells, of course, going to Texas Tech from Utah State. Mm-hmm. Neil Brown going to West Virginia from Troy. I look at this a little bit differently than I think you do.
Okay.
So for sure, under the radar as an offensive mind going to the Big 12 is notable.
Yeah.
I think the under the radar story is actually their defenses.
Okay.
Because Troy has been really good as a defensive entity for a while under Neil Brown. Mm-hmm. And, Matt Wells started out very strongly the first 2 years of his tenure at Utah State, and then took a few gap years, not going to lie.
Tough
but last
to
year,
win. Yeah.
Last year they saw a bit of a resurgence on the defensive side of the ball. And it's something we talk about from time to time here on the show. A little bit of defense in the Big 12, how that could change the landscape, is an interesting topic for me. Now, I'm not saying they're going to go out there and be shut down, but TCU had a decided advantage when they were able to play shutdown defense or just any defense in that conference. So
definitely
longer term, if it works out for Matt Wells, if it works out for Neil Brown, if they're able to build more of a defensive presence, certainly at a place like a Texas Tech, that to me is very, very interesting and could have longer term ramifications.
Yeah, I'm looking at Utah State's defense last year, and I don't think they gave up 30 points between the Air Force game and then the Boise State game to finish out the Mountain West slate.
You got to have offense if you're going to compete in the Big 12, no doubt.
Right, and they did.
But to have a defense, really goes a long way in that conference.
Yeah, I'm not as concerned about specifically the offense, just whether or not Texas Tech with Matt Wells is in a better place than West Virginia with Neil Brown.
Okay.
And what he was able to do at Troy, both winning within the Sun Belt and getting his team ready to and succeed against big, high-level Power 5 opponents. We saw it against Nebraska. We saw it against LSU. There's something about getting the most out of his players, and certainly it's a different beast at West Virginia. But what Neil Brown has been able to prove at Troy and taking that to a place, and West Virginia is in a better place in terms of brand, in terms of program strength than Texas Tech is at the moment. So I think I like that marriage a little bit better.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I guess the knock on West Virginia's current situation is that being in the Big 12, they're kind of cut off from the heartbeat of that conference.
Sure.
They're separated geographically from really the bedrock of,
so
Oklahoma
Texas
and
Tech is not super close to places.
But I mean, it's closer than West Virginia. I guess to your point, though, West Virginia is in a better place just in terms of brand. I think it's easier to recruit to Morgantown than it is to Lubbock.
Yeah, I think it's more difficult to recruit to the Big 12, though, in Morgantown. Dana Holgerson did a good job recruiting Florida, doing a good job with transfers, and it's a different kind of monster. And if you're going to look at Texas Tech as having another advantage over West Virginia, it's the presence of a hopefully healthy Alan Bowman, British comedy legend Alan Bowman,
sure,
as a foundational piece, whereas West Virginia is, again, in quarterback transition.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we shall see. Let's move on to number 10. Daniel.
We ride.
We do ride. We ride with Dana Holgerson here.
Oh, good transition.
Yeah. Houston has ponied up the cash. That's a long gallop I've got going on there. Let me kill that.
I like it. No, keep it rolling.
Is Dana Holgerson, Dan, a big enough name, a big enough college football presence that if the schedule Houston has in front of it ends up working out the way I think, at least at this point in
or eventually. It doesn't even have to be this year, but eventually.
But they've got a nice schedule this year. They've got Oklahoma right out of the chute. They've got a non-conference game against Wazoo. They go on the road at UCF. There's some ammo on that schedule.
Oh, for sure.
Let's say hypothetically, and I don't expect this to happen, but hypothetically, Dana Holgerson runs the table. Does he have enough clout as a college football mind, a college football coach, to get Houston into some conversation?
I think more so than usual. Scott Frost had become a big enough name at UCF, but that was over the course of 2 years, essentially. Whereas Dana Holgerson has built up his name and reputation for a while now, even going back to Oklahoma State as a coordinator and what he's been able to accomplish at West Virginia. He won a then BCS game with West Virginia. Whereas with even looking at bigger names of schools on the G5 level, Charlie Strong's a decent enough name. It's not as good as Dana Holgerson right now. Brian Harsin, decent, but if you're juggling similar schedules, if you're comparing things on the margin, saying, yes, but Houston has, this Heisman-ish quarterback and they have Dana Holgerson running things, I think it carries more cachet than a G5 has lately, if ever.
Okay.
Maybe going back to Chris Peterson in Boise State because he had built his name up to that point. But outside of that, and Houston probably having a talent level that is going to be higher than pretty much everybody, perhaps outside of UCF, I do like where Houston is at in terms of they can vault themselves into a conversation in a more meaningful way than most.
All right, let's move on, Dan.
That was our most serious XM question, by the way.
Very serious.
Can Houston now go with Dana Holgorsen to the playoff? Is his name big enough? Give us a call.
Breaking into the top 10.
Yeah.
Okay. The ACC, a sneaky fun conference, I think.
Yeah.
Especially when you get to what you've described here lovingly as medium profile.
I mean well.
Medium profile ACC schools and ACC hires here. You're referring specifically to Jeff Collins and Scott Satterfield, both of whom are taking over. In the ACC, we've got Collins at Georgia Tech, Satterfield, of course, taking that Louisville job. Who do you trust more? Who do you trust more to do a full-on rebuild, revamp the program in the, I don't want to say short, I don't want to say long, let's say medium term.
If we're saying medium profile, we're saying medium term, right?
Medium, yeah.
And I don't think long term quite exists anymore in the sport. So medium term is, 2 to 3 years. I think it's Jeff Collins. I think with the talent available, even though, yes, Georgia Tech has admission standards, which are not normal and not usual. It's a tough school to get into as compared to some of the schools they're competing with for recruits. But the fact is they're in Atlanta, a desirable place. They're in a state that produces a ton of talent in Georgia. And I think there are some administrative issues at Louisville that Scott Satterfield has to deal with that perhaps Jeff Collins doesn't. I don't know that for sure. I know that money is tight with Georgia Tech. And there are obstacles that are different. I believe Louisville did just lose their biggest donor in Father John. Yes?
Yeah.
So there is that. I am a little bit more impressed at this point with what Jeff Collins has done in raising the profile of Georgia Tech, doing a bunch of Waffle House things.
Yeah.
I like it. I like that even in a state where there's such a clear alpha in UGA, that Jeff Collins has done a pretty nice and interesting job early.
I like Jeff Collins a lot.
Yeah.
And I know from the people who have written in, who listen to this program religiously, the Georgia Tech fans who are just waiting for something desperate. We met them in Atlanta. They are desperate to have things go in a different direction. I think my answer is going to be Jeff Collins because I want to give those people hope, Dan.
It's a bit disingenuous to say that Georgia Tech needs revamping. I think they just need, I don't know, because Paul Johnson did a, all things considered, pretty good job with Tech. It's Louisville that really needs to be sort of gutted and down to the studs with where they were at last year. So I don't think that's necessary with Georgia Tech. They're shifting things around offensively. I still think they're going to succeed enough. But I thought a refresh was necessary just in terms of the perception of Georgia Tech.
Moving on, let's go to number 8. Let's talk Fargo. Well, we got the sound in the background. Yeah, North Dakota State lost its head football coach because he is going to K-State, which I think is a pretty big hire, Dan.
Yes.
And then also in the great state of Kansas, we've got Les Miles coming out of retirement, apparently had enough of the Dr. Pepper commercials.
He's a vegan now.
He's a vegan. He's still crazy and fun. And of course, we're going to talk about him all season long, but he is now taking over at Kansas. Which of those two situations do you like more?
My conventional wisdom, my Danventional wisdom, is that Kansas State has made a more foundational hire. He was going to come in, coming from somewhere that has won, understanding the way to coach players, coach staff, go about winning business in a way that Les Miles has not done in a while. And the Les Miles hire does not feel like, when you envision what Kansas needs, it is almost like a Chris Kleiman type.
Yeah.
And they went with a Les Miles type. What Kansas needs is, and this, I am open to being surprised and shocked. What Kansas needs is someone to come in and say, year one, this is how we're recruiting. This is how we're hiring. This is how we are hiring support staff. These are the types of plays we're going to run on both sides of the ball. This is the specific identity I want this program to be. Whereas I can't help but look at Les Miles and think, well, the guy wants to coach again, and he's going to just try to do what he did at LSU at Kansas. And it feels like a disaster waiting to happen. We're seeing all of these carefully constructed stories of it's a new Les Miles. Les Miles has really gone through a transformation. And I think at this point, it's hard to teach that old dog new tricks. That's how I'm looking at the situation.
Does he need to learn new tricks? Because I look at the Les Miles hire not from the standpoint of he's going to turn them into any kind of superpower overnight.
No.
But he is sort of an instant shot of credibility. And that program desperately needs something. They got to rebuild their image first, because this is a program that's been down and out for a long time. I think an obvious place to start if you're Kansas is to try and inject some excitement back into your program, and then hopefully use that as a catalyst to build moving forward. Les Miles probably isn't going to be there in 5 years, but if he's able to try and get a program moving in a good direction, hand it off to somebody, look, how much worse can it get, Dan? I don't think it's a bad move at all. That being said, I like the Chris Kleiman hire an awful lot at K-State.
Is that an actual winning formula, though? Are there teams that have actively had 3-year interim coaches that have worked and have changed the fortunes around of a program and handed it off to a new guy? On
a higher profile level, isn't that what North Carolina, we're going to talk about this, not to give too much away, but we're going to talk about North Carolina momentarily.
We're going to talk about North Carolina.
Brown. Isn't that sort of the same model?
He coached there. He did coach there.
Well, he did coach there. Yeah, he coached there, but he's still the old dog coming into a situation where some expect him to need to learn new tricks.
I'm with you. I think Mack Brown specifically at North Carolina is different, because I don't think he was looking for any job to come back for. I think North Carolina was a specific job that he said to himself, I'm not going to coach again, but if this comes open, I'm going to jump on it. I think it is that specific with him. Whereas I think Les Miles, we heard about him interviewing at Houston. We've heard about his interest in a number of jobs. And him taking the Kansas job feels like I just need to get back in the game kind of thing, rather than I am going to do what it takes. And thinking about it in terms of, well, he's going to get it in a good place and move on. I can't think of a program right now on a Power 5 level where that's actually been a formula that has worked.
Yeah, I don't know.
You either put in the time like somebody like Dan Mullen did at Mississippi State, taking what felt like an also-ran program and building up a foundation, hiring super well, consistently, investing a ton of time into the program to get it into a much better place. And believe me, it's not just you saying this. This seems to be the conventional wisdom that Les Miles can turn things around for the next guy.
Yeah,
I don't see it. I
don't know if I see the turnaround story, but I think if you're Kansas, you're probably tired of being the bottom dweller, both in terms of win-loss and in terms of the way you're perceived by recruits, by other football programs. And
sure,
Les Miles was there. He clearly was willing to take the job, and he does bring with him some degree of credibility that has not been there in a head football coach in quite some time. So it's been so bad, I wonder how much worse it can get. How much worse could he seriously do than the guy before him or the guy before him?
I agree. For how high profile it is, and I don't know the exact number that they're paying him, I don't think that matters all that much. But in terms of what is out there as it relates to younger coaches, interesting minds, up-and-comers, great recruiters that are not in their 60s, I hesitate to look at this as a big win because of what it will take specifically at Kansas, a place where they considered, should we just shut down the program? Should we just, cut our losses? Because that's where we were within this last year.
Well, I'll tell you this much.
I don't see it with Les Miles.
I'll tell you this much. He learned how to wear foundation in those Dr. Pepper commercials. Yeah. He had a lot of makeup on that face.
Yeah, he very much did. And he's now a vegan. So there's that.
Moving on. I don't know what this sound is. I just found it.
American Top 40.
that run a little bit.
I love it. We used to listen to the hits of the country. And for me, a lot of the times for the first time and figure out how we felt about them.
So this has nothing to do with number 7.
I can find a way to twist it in.
Well, I'm sure we could. Of course, we're professionals here in the podcasting realm. But number 7, what's your number 7 thing?
So number 7, Georgia loses both of their coordinators. That would be Jim Chaney going back to Tennessee, and Mel Tucker, understandably so, taking the head coaching job at Colorado. And so for a team that has done a magnificent job both on and off the field, recruiting, winning, dominating the SEC East mostly, my question now becomes, will Kirby Smart, in moving on from sort of seasoned lieutenants that he had, will he empower the promoted guys? Because he promoted from within. James Coley now takes over the offense. He was a co-OC last year, but it really did seem like Jim Chaney's offense. And then has a co-defensive coordinator situation after Mel Tucker moved on. Will he empower them like he empowered Mel Tucker and Jim Chaney to just do their thing and do it well? Or if they go down 14-3 to South Carolina, does Kirby panic and say, run the Georgia playbook, don't run the James Coley playbook kind of thing?
Yeah, well, and it'll be interesting too from the standpoint of coaching turnover and just what we see going on the other side of the conference with Alabama, because that's been a story last couple of years.
And it's a reality.
Yeah, of course. There's always this turnover now under Nick Saban. It's going to be the same deal again in 2019 for him, where he has to retool his staff, find a way to get everyone rowing in the same direction and still organize a team. Kirby could find himself in that situation before long, because recruiting has been incredible. In his time at Georgia, it has been incredible. And we're not talking like USC level talent. We're talking near Bama level talent, near Clemson level talent, what he's pulling in. So
they've out-recruited Clemson.
For sure. That in and of itself gives you a bit of a safety net, regardless of who your coaches are. So you would hope that he would continue to let the guys underneath him call the shots, find a way to put them in a good situation to let them flourish and show some personality in the game plan. But this honestly is one of the questions that I don't think we have a definitive answer to. We just don't know. He hasn't been a head coach long enough to really give us a tell here.
No, and those were two very savvy hires. Bringing Mel Tucker over from Alabama, I think he was the defensive backs coach.
Yeah, sure.
Essentially a co-defensive backs coach with Nick Saban, and Jim Chaney, who we've long considered to be that offensive consultant. That he was a savvy hire in that Kirby Smart didn't have to think about those things all that much. He had a ton of trust in those coordinators by all accounts. And so as it looks right now, I believe James Coley ran the offenses at Miami for a couple of years, where they had the skill players, they had decent enough quarterback play. The lines were not great, but these were Al Golden teams, and it's hard to fully look at what he did as a complete picture of what he's able to do, especially with the type of talent he has at Georgia. I'm a little bit worried. I think it's possible that they lose a game that they would not have lost. Do they still go 10-2? For sure. I am worried about this transition year just because the strength of that staff was, it seemed, Kirby Smart's trust of his coordinators.
Interesting. Okay.
Yep. Number 6.
Number 6, Dan. Let's go back to the future for a second, if we could. We sort of gave away the game here.
Yeah.
And talked about this one ahead of schedule. But Mack Brown is returning to North Carolina. Mack Brown, I believe, made that announcement right after we hit stop a couple months ago, which is always fun from a podcasting perspective. Gotta love on-demand audio. All right. We talked about this a little bit and how this model ends up working for teams who have tried to use it in the past. But let's talk specific to North Carolina for a second. It's interesting. Mack Brown's an affable figure in college football, lovable figure. What does UNC going in the Mack Brown direction signal to you, signal to us as college football fans about what North Carolina's goals are going to be in the short term? Right. I look at this and I say to myself that this is just begging for some kind of coach in waiting scenario 2 to 3 years down the road.
I don't know who that guy is, but the good news for North Carolina is they play in the Coastal. There's no giant hurdle This is a division that Pitt won last year while not being all that good. So you've got Pitt, you've got Georgia Tech, you've got Virginia, Miami with a new coach, Georgia Tech with a new coach, Virginia Tech with a not super exciting offseason with some of their losses. I just saw that Josh Jackson went to Maryland, immediately eligible.
Right.
And a Duke team starting over at quarterback and back to Carolina. So the goals can be pretty high and not be all that difficult to attain. You win the Coastal, that's a great goal. You can win the Coastal going 8-4, at least over the next couple of years, potentially. I don't think North Carolina's goals are anything beyond consistent bowl team, excuse me. And that's fine. I think that's what that signals. Yeah. I don't know what North Carolina's actual program ceiling is with having Clemson in the other side of the conference, but with Mack Brown and saying, we want to be pretty good, and it's hard to imagine Mack Brown being anything beyond pretty good, if that makes sense.
I agree with that.
I think they're happy to go to the Belk Bowl.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Does the ACC go to the Belk Bowl? I don't even remember, but it seems like they should.
I got you. Let's move on. Let's go to number 5.
The coaching
carousel.
So look, I already played, I love that roar. I already played the transfer portal sound here, which is what I probably should have held out for number 5. This isn't a coaching carousel, but it is a quarterback carousel. We saw a number of high-profile transfers in the world of college football. Chief among them, of course, Justin Fields going to Ohio State. We already mentioned Jalen Hurts going to Oklahoma. We had Tate Martel going down to Miami. We even had Brandon Wimbush going to UCF. So there are a bunch of names there.
I've got the whole list of quarterbacks in the transfer portal, by the way.
There's a number of them, right? I mean, you could read
Kelly Bryant to Mizzou.
You could read till you're blue in the face. Kelly Bryant. Who else?
Ben Hicks to Arkansas from SMU. Devin Modster, UCLA to Cal. Or perhaps Cal gets a decent enough quarterback. Sean Robinson also to Mizzou. Jack Tuttle, a highly touted quarterback coming out of high school. Utah to Indiana.
Him. Yeah.
Alex Delton goes to TCU because they have some depth issues at quarterback. Austin Kendall, we remember the very quick controversy over Lincoln Reilly preventing him from transferring within the conference. Oklahoma to West Virginia. Cam Rising, we mentioned earlier in the show. Texas to Utah, and then Bichelle also Texas to SMU.
A lot going on the
and the Bauer Hour. How can we forget the Bauer Hour?
Of course. Let's focus in on Justin Fields, Jalen Hurts, and who else? Tate Martel,
yeah.
Let's say those 3 guys. Who best fits into their new offensive scheme?
I would even maybe add Kelly Bryant. That's a high profile enough, yeah.
At Mizzou. If you are ranking from 1 through 4, how would you rank those 4 names? Again, Justin Fields, Ohio State, Jalen Hurts, Oklahoma, Tate Martel, Miami, Kelly Bryant, Mizzou.
Justin Fields feels like the smoothest transition. And as Ohio State moved away from constant power game with JT Barrett, moving towards more downfield with Dwayne Haskins, they opened things up. They spread to pass more than they spread to run. I think that should benefit Justin Fields. Jalen Hurts, TBD, but certainly looks to be more wide open at Oklahoma than what he was used to at Alabama, or at least what Alabama had him do with the Tide. Tate Martell, TBD, but he gets Dan Enos. Dan Enos is somebody who ran a nice, I don't know how to describe Alabama's offense last year. It was sort of a downfield power RPO.
Yeah.
That
sounds
anything.
Right. Sure.
And then Kelly Bryant feels very different to Mizzou, but at times this Mizzou offense was quite fun, especially look at the game against Florida. So I'm going to say Fields is in the best place. Tate Martell, I would say maybe slightly ahead, although this Miami offense was pretty rough at times. So I'm going to go Fields, Hurts, Martell, Bryant.
I'm going to go Fields. I agree with you that he feels like a very natural.
Different from what he was asked to do at Georgia, for sure.
Different, for sure, but maybe a better fit for him. Just in terms of his skill set. I think he's number 1. But it's tough to say because we haven't seen enough of him. Just a little bit of him, but we haven't seen enough of him in a big game to really say that definitively. But I feel like we know enough about Jalen Hurts and Kelly Bryant to know that they're not number 1. I would put, and this is just me, because I'm forever a fan of the backup quarterback, being a Notre Dame fan. It's just what I do. I'm going to say Fields 1, Tate Martell 2. at Miami, followed by Jalen
Interesting.
Hurts 3 at Oklahoma and Kelly Bryant 4 at Mizzou. I'm very curious to see what Dan Enos is able to do with Tate Martell. Another dual threat kid, not as big as Justin Fields, but that situation at Miami, we're going to talk about it here. Again,
rough offense at times last
year.
year.
Too much away. Yeah, rough offense at times last year. But Dan Enos is a guy who some thought could take over for Nick Saban at Alabama. He's a creative offensive mind. He had a very good year. To get him to come over to Miami and now be the offensive coordinator is a huge coup for Manny Diaz.
Well, he was just last year, I think he was just the quarterback's coach and maybe associate head coach. Because it was Loxley running the offense.
That's
Loxley and I guess Gaddis. He was not an offensive coordinator.
Not an offensive coordinator.
No, you can credit him with the development of Tua in a number of ways. And hopefully that carries over to Tate Martell if you're a Miami fan. But yeah, he was in line to be the offensive coordinator until he allegedly left under the cover of night. He Baltimore colted.
All right. That's my ranking. I think we know a lot about Jalen Hurts. I think he'll be successful. Not sure what that offense is going to look like. Have a lot of faith that Lincoln Reilly can put a system around him that will meet his skill set.
Right.
But I feel like we know a lot about Jalen Hurts. And Kelly Bryant, I think there is a ceiling there. And I don't know what, like you said, he is different to Missouri. Just not sure what that's going to look like. So, yeah, let's go with the art of the possible and two guys who haven't seen a whole lot of game action, Justin Fields and Tate Martell, 1-2.
Number 4. This doesn't make sense.
Makes no sense. It was just in front of me. We talked about Miami and Tate Martell. Of course, they get a prominent blue chip recruit to come over from Ohio State. We talk about Dan Enos coming over from Alabama. Haven't talked enough about Manny Diaz coming over from Temple / from Miami. Mark Richt retired again right after we hit the stop button one of these Sundays. Amazing how that works in the offseason.
Damn you. Yeah.
Mark Richt no longer at Miami. Kind of took a lot of folks by surprise. Miami moved very quickly to reel back Manny Diaz, who had earlier in the offseason taken the job up at Temple, but Manny Diaz clearly finds a home in Miami. He's from Miami. So to bring him back into the fold was sort of a big deal for them. Why is he different, I guess is the question. Because, Mark Richt was an alum of the U, and clearly he had, a lot of proven experience in the SEC East, was a very successful coach at Georgia before he overstayed his welcome a bit, I guess. I don't know how else to describe it. But he was supposed to be the guy who was going to rebuild the Canes into what they were previously. Now Manny Diaz, a local guy, a younger guy, mind you, but a local guy, someone who knows the culture, he is stepping back into that role now as the head football coach at Miami. Why is he going to be different in your estimation?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. That's the question. And the concerning part of this is Miami's a tough place to win on a high level. And that's partially because of Clemson. It's partially just because you're recruiting against Florida State and Florida. This is, even though you have talent in your backyard, you're recruiting against giants. Alabama has done a phenomenal job in South Florida recently. And so they have started, I think, the 2020 class quite well. And I do like the hires that he made. He hired, I believe, Louisiana Tech's defensive coordinator to come in and at least co-run the defense for the Canes. I like what he's done early, but I've made the comparison before that I think there's a lot of crossover with Miami and USC.
Yeah.
Where there's that insular culture of hiring Miami guys, having Randy Shannon, having Mark Richt, where there is something comforting in a bad way about going in that direction. Everything appears to me that Manny Diaz should succeed. He should recruit well. They should be able to bring in decent enough quarterbacks, even though it's pretty tough to develop high school quarterbacks in Miami or in Florida, just because defenses are so good on the high school level. But I think talent-wise, Miami will be at a place that they haven't been in a long time under Manny Diaz. And a big reason for that is he is on the come up. This is the job he has dreamt about. This is the job he will pour every single fiber of his being into. Whereas Mark Richt, if all things were going his way, he'd have been in Athens and wasn't up to him. And so he had a nice landing spot in South Florida, but I think there is something about Manny Diaz rethinking how Miami is run being an extremely positive thing.
I also think being from Miami, we're not too big on getting the hometown guy or the alum to come back to the school, but we've done this show long enough and talked to a number of personalities just on the recruiting side who really consistently indicate that the culture of the Florida high school football player, of South Florida in particular, is just a little bit different. Mm-hmm. And you got to be plugged into that sometimes to be successful. Manny Diaz certainly is, in a way that I don't think Mark Richt ever could have been. So I'm curious to see if he is able to somehow reinstitute that swagger at Miami.
It feels sort of intangible, and hopefully it's in a good way. Ty, we have breaking news if you want to play that sound, if you have that sound on your board.
What is it?
With the first pick in the 2019 Fantasy Things draft, Dan Rubenstein has selected Manny Diaz's father was the mayor of Miami. I just wanted to get in on that pick in late February.
I'm going to add that to our list.
Please add it.
I'm going to add it to our running list. Let me jot that down. Okay. Mm-hmm. Moving on.
Roll time.
It's the only Alabama-themed sound that I have here as we crack into the top three. Again, sort of hinted at this one before, but Alabama assistants, again, leaving en masse.
Mm-hmm.
This is becoming more of a feature than the bug.
Yeah.
So, where do we stand on how this affects Nick Saban, Dan? Where do we stand? Is this...
We know. I think it's been answered.
Yeah, I mean, should this be a talking point now in 2019? It clearly worked out okay last year. Nick Saban's clearly proven that he knows how to manage a situation where there's a lot of coaching turnover. Mm-hmm. Is there any reason for concern here at all?
No, I don't think there's any reason, because over and over, year over year, I mean, how many former Saban assistants are head coaches right now or coordinators somewhere? On both sides of the ball, he brought in a number of well-known enough coaches. I think Kyle Flood is running the offensive line. Sark is the offensive coordinator. Pete Golding, who was there last year, I think is going to run the defense, I suppose, along with Nick Saban. Charles Kelly, who ran the defense at Florida State. Sal Sunseri, who was a former linebackers coach for Nick Saban way back when. There's a number of familiar names. So this specific class of coaches, I'm not terribly worried about. I'm more concerned about, is there a way to envision an Alabama downfall that is not related to, Nick Saban just got bored. The fire turned out.
Okay, so you're talking
if it's not coaching attrition, I don't know what it is.
You're talking about some sort of rising threat in the SEC.
I imagine it is. I imagine we know the clear threat right now is Georgia, but they're not in the same division. They don't have to play them, after a tough game, or sandwiched between tough games in October or something like that. It's not that week in, week out challenge that the SEC West has been certain years, not every year. So my question to you right now is, what will or would contribute to Alabama's demise quicker? And that is having that almost on equal footing power like Auburn has been occasionally, or LSU has been occasionally, or having that depth of division in having the Mississippi schools look very good, having Jimbo do really good things at A&M, having Arkansas become sneaky feisty with Chad Morris. Do you think it's depth of pretty good, or having that toe-to-toe superpower in the division?
I think it's depth, to be honest, because when you've got the depth, you've got a constant threat of being knocked off on any given Saturday.
No weeks off, right?
Yeah. And I think that probably puts more of a strain on the dynasty than anything else. Just having week in, week out difficult competition. Now, you could make the case that it's still pretty damn tough to play in the SEC. The teams in the SEC West, even if they're not logging as many wins as some of their other competition around college football, still pretty damn good. But my answer, I think, is always depth on that front.
Yeah, and that's, I think, what we've seen with Alabama struggling with Mississippi State a couple years ago, losing to Ole Miss, losing to Texas A&M. They didn't lose to excellent teams. They lost to very good teams, but not teams toe-to-toe, talent-wise, coaching-wise, consistent results-wise.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's right. Okay.
Moving on. Last two. Number 2.
No, by tomorrow you'll barely be able to breathe.
Okay. Oh, man. So that is our sound clip that we played for Beck-Meyer syndrome.
Yes.
We mean that in no derogatory health way. Maybe I should have played a different sound.
That's fine. We stand by it.
Urban Meyer's retired. We wish him well. That means that Ryan Day has been promoted. So Beck-Meyer syndrome is gone.
Yeah, it appears to be the case.
The question is
eradicated.
Eradicated, thank you.
Yeah.
The question is this. You've got here in red lettering, how much closer does this bring the likes of Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin, Michigan State to Ohio State? I would just ask a larger question, and it's one I hinted at a couple weeks ago, but
how much farther has Purdue distanced themselves now?
That's, I think, the natural, next question. Yeah. No, but I mean, Urban Meyer is a legend. Urban Meyer is one of the greatest coaches in the history of college football. Sure. And Ryan Day is stepping into a situation where he's got obviously a lot of talent. He's got a great situation at Ohio State, and I think he proved his mettle in the early part of the season last year when Urban Meyer was suspended. He did a good job. But it feels very rare to me that you have a legend retire and then the program that is handed over, presumably to a younger coach with less experience, all that. It's rare to me that the program is going to continue without skipping a beat. Like what we've seen at Oklahoma with Lincoln Reilly taking over for Bob Stoops is actually pretty rare.
Right.
So I guess my question is whether or not, in your estimation, Ryan Day is going to be able to continue on this trajectory for a period of, let's say, longer than 3 years in Columbus.
I think that's impossible because of what he's replacing. He's got to fall
and
back
that's,
a little bit.
And that's sort of my point. You know, that's where you get into the danger zone a little bit because expectations at Ohio State have been so high for so long. Ohio State's been incredible under Urban Meyer. I don't have his record in front of me, but you can count on one hand, two hands, the number of losses he's had. So for Ryan Day to take over now, I think on some level, expectations have to be lowered. They need to at least give him a chance to find his way in Columbus. And please don't hold him to the same standard as Urban Meyer.
Yes, I think that's right. The good news for, whether or not the gap has been closed between Ohio State and the other recent Big Ten powers is there's continuity on the coaching staff. Larry Johnson hangs around. I know they promoted Brian Hartline. He came in during all the mess at wide receiver coach. They bring in the two coaches from Michigan, Greg Madison, who has succeeded pretty much everywhere recently. And Kevin Wilson, I believe, has stayed on as the offensive coordinator, but they bring in Oklahoma State coordinator as sort of a co-coordinator, Mike Yurcik, who did some good things in Stillwater. So I like what he's done in terms of continuity, rounding out the staff in his own sort of vision. But to look at the consistency of everything Urban Meyer did, both on the field and on the recruiting trail, it feels impossible. However, the good news is Wisconsin just took a step back, for sure. Michigan State looks like a mess on offense, and just year after year now, they're wasting an excellent defense. Michigan is trying yet again to figure out offense. And Penn State, for as well as they've recruited, have not fully delivered in closing out close games. And so there is not that clear ascending team to replace Ohio State. So that's why I still think he could continue things in the short and medium term, but to do it like a maniac cyborg it's asking a lot.
Yeah, it is. Okay. And finally, we come back to Old Trusty and talk about USC and their coaching drama. So Clay Helton was retained. He's going to be head football coach of 2019. He will be on the hot seat. I don't think there's any question about that. But he made a splash because when Texas Tech decided to part ways with Cliff Kingsbury, obviously that was a name that was very sought after in many circles, both college football and otherwise, as we came to know, as he took the Arizona Cardinals job.
Right.
Cliff Kingsbury signed on with USC and then eventually signed out rather quickly. That's not because of USC. It's because a better situation came about. But
definitely.
Suffice to say, there was a bit of a dramatic situation there. And now Clay Helton's in a spot where he has to try and find a way to piece this back together. Now, he didn't do poorly in getting a replacement for Cliff Kingsbury. I think he's going to be just fine there. But the larger point is that USC is still in a very tenuous spot now as we enter this new season. Are we going into the year assuming that Clay Helton's a lame duck? Is that fair? Is that realistic? Where do you come down on that?
He would have to not only win the South and win the conference, but do so in such an emphatic way. This offense under Graham Harrell would have to be so incredible. The defense would have to be outstanding. The defense was actually very good last year, but they would have to be a playoff contender for most of the year, that it would be unfathomable to get rid of Clay Helton after the year. And that seems far-fetched.
Yeah.
That seems like everything would have to click in such an unimaginable way. And they've recruited well enough. This past season's recruiting class was clearly underwhelming. But before that, defensively, there's a lot of talent up front. The secondary has been good. There's been continuity on defense. You're talking about 10.5 being the number that he has to hit, I guess, in order to see another year, because there were references and reports that his buyout was astronomical, and that was a big reason why they just didn't want to eat double-digit millions of dollars on a guy who had just won the Pac-12 for sure, but understandable frustration with how they looked last year.
We'll see.
Do you think he's a lame duck? Do you think that it's a situation that there is no number that he could hit short of going undefeated?
If he wins 10 games, it's a tough out to get rid of him.
They lose close and respectably.
Yeah. I mean, if he were to go, what's the number? What's the number that he has to get to? Are you saying 10.5 is your over under?
Yeah, he has to go probably over 10.5.
I say 9.5.
I'm looking at their schedule right now.
I say 9.5. If he goes 10-2, he keeps it. But 9-3 puts him on the brink. 8-4, it's over.
Their schedule, because last year it was a rough start. Their schedule, I think they were at Stanford and at Texas in consecutive weeks. And they have Stanford at home. Like their schedule until, I guess, early October, late September. They're at Washington, at Notre Dame with a bye week between them. But on the back half, it's pretty good. USC's road games are as follows. BYU, fine, not easy. Good young quarterback, but fine. At Washington, very tough. At Notre Dame, very tough. And then the back half is at Colorado, at ASU, at Cal, UCLA, obviously, in LA. They have Oregon at home. Who knows what Oregon looks like by November. It's not a terrible schedule.
So 9-3. 9-3 is a danger.
A bye week between, if they go 9-3 and look pretty good, I think he's gone.
9-3 is danger zone. Yeah. I don't know. I am going into the season under the assumption that there is more gravity pulling Clay Helton out of that job than keeping him in it.
What if they go 9-3, beating Washington, Notre Dame, and Oregon, and they lose on a Hail Mary? They lose 2 games because of quarterback injury. Man. But at fully healthy, they're clearly good, winning in Seattle and in South Bend and beating the Ducks.
What if they go 8-4, losing to all the good teams, but still somehow win the Pac-12?
Oh God, he's gone.
Won a conference championship.
Because winning the what does winning the Pac-12 in 2019 mean?
I don't know.
It doesn't feel like much. If you're winning it at 8-4, presumably 9-4, that means that the Pac-12 is probably not all that good.
I know.
That means you lost to a not good Washington team, but maybe beat them in the championship game. You lose to Notre Dame, which seems like it'll be a respectable loss. You lose to Oregon, who then turns out to either not be good enough to play in the championship game or just not be that good. And I just, if they go 9-4 and win the Pac-12, it's an indictment against the Pac-12 for sure.
All right. Well, write in. Let us know what you think. Tell us where we're wrong, where we're right, where you agree, where we should have asked questions, and where Dan's list is wrong.
Can I posit one more bonus question?
One more. You only get one.
This was a good one we received for our Q&A a couple weeks ago that we didn't have time to get to.
Yes, please.
That now feels more appropriate than ever.
Okay.
Because I need to think about the types of films and in order I will be showing my son when he's of age.
Okay.
So short and saucy, let's assume from Reddit, I don't know, wants to know favorite Disney and Pixar movie.
Okay, well, can't you group both Disney and Pixar together?
Obviously. Let's go non-Pixar Disney and Pixar Disney.
We talked about this on a walk back from the train that we took to Wrigley Field when we were out in Chicago, didn't we?
That's true. Yep.
So you want to go animated versus computer animated?
Mm-hmm.
I think it comes down to 1A and 1B being Aladdin and Lion King for the animated variety.
Probably, although there are people that are super into Emperor's New Groove.
No, come on.
I did not know that until recently. I am telling you.
Get out of here.
I am telling you that's a reality. There are people that are into Little Mermaid. There are people into Beauty and the Beast. You're talking about your older 90s, 80s classics, but there have been some big movies.
The answer is, I think, one, Lion King. A very, very close second, and sometimes I change my mind, is Aladdin. And then everyone else. Those are the top two.
No Bambi, no Peter Pan for you.
No, not for me.
DuckTales the movie.
No.
A Goofy movie, Pocahontas.
Pocahontas was good.
James and the Giant Peach?
No.
Okay. I think my answer is Aladdin, though seeing Will Smith as the genie in that commercial
down a notch.
It gave me some hesitation.
You got an escape pod if you want it.
I know. I'm going to stay with Aladdin right now.
Okay. And that's
number
perfectly
one
acceptable.
Animated Disney movie.
Now,
where it becomes difficult is Pixar, for sure.
Pixar gets very, very difficult because there are elements of all those movies that I find very appealing. There are movies like WALL-E that are criminally underrated.
Yeah.
Great movie. There are also movies like Up that I don't think are on the same level. But let's be honest.
Up is emotional manipulation, though.
The first 10 minutes of Up just gutted me as a human being.
Of course, but I think that's actual manipulation.
Gutted me as a human being.
Yeah.
So I can't put it in the same category.
Did you see Bao, the short movie? The short film that they were airing before, I don't know, The Incredibles or one of them?
No.
BAO. Bao, about like a Chinese pork bun. Tough watch in like a very emotional, good way.
All right. So let's go through Pixar movies.
All right, so it sounds to me like WALL-E has your heart.
Well, WALL-E was very good.
Yeah,
WALL-E was underrated. So it's probably in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Frozen, I don't believe, was technically Pixar.
No, I don't think Frozen's Pixar.
Frozen was officially Disney,
and so also not that good.
I was a big Frozen fan. We talked.
Oh my God, Ty! Don't say that out loud.
Let it go, Dan. Just let it go.
Oh God.
All right, so Toy Story. Toy Story was the original.
Classic. Absolutely. And holds up really, really well.
I think Toy Story still is top spot for me. But I'd also posit that WALL-E's in the discussion. Finding Nemo was outstanding. Don't forget about that one.
It's a good movie.
And you recently saw Coco.
Oh, I've recently seen Coco like 17 times, Tyler.
Now, as you know, we had a rather traumatic emotional experience in our family over the course of the last year. So I haven't really had a chance to dive into Coco.
Buddy, you might need to do that one solo.
You told me that could potentially be very, very emotional.
Huge trigger.
So where do you come down on this then?
To me, it's probably Coco and WALL-E.
Okay.
And Coco, WALL-E, Toy Story. I think you're right.
What about The Incredibles?
The Incredibles, the first one was really, really good. The second one was B-.
Okay.
Not that great. Didn't really do it for me. I'm going to say because of my affinity for Mexico and Mexican culture, the music, and just technologically how far they've come. This was 2017 and the original Toy Story was mid-90s?
Yeah.
It's certainly more of a spectacle.
1995. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm going to say Coco, and my don't sleep on it is Toy Story 3.
Yeah, not bad.
Really good. I'm amazed they're doing a fourth.
The fourth actually looks pretty good.
It looks really good, but there was a good amount of closure in 3.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see. Right in again.
Are there any Pixar movies you didn't like?
I didn't see Cars or Ratatouille.
There's not much to Cars. It's fine.
Wasn't into A Bug's Life.
Loved Ratatouille. I thought Ratatouille was great.
Inside Out was okay.
Inside Out I thought was really good.
I enjoyed that. I didn't see Brave, and I heard Brave was very good.
Didn't see Brave.
Not into Finding Dory.
Didn't see Finding Dory.
Not into that one.
Inside Out's really good. Coco is excellence. If I'm gonna say this as straightforward as I possibly can. If you haven't seen Coco, go see Coco. Find a way to see Coco. Because do so not in a room where you would be embarrassed to shed tears. Because if you are fully focused on the movie and you let it absorb you, you are going to succumb. And it's, God, is it good.
Mm.
So that's I think I'm strong Coco and tentative Aladdin. Dark horse for animated might be Jungle Book.
Okay. Not bad. Not bad.
Baloo the Bear? What?
Yeah.
Not bad.
Bare necessities, yeah. All right. Well, write in.
Mowgli?
Let us know. solidverbal@gmail.com. You can also find us Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the usual hotspots. Please do leave us a review if you like the show. We appreciate it. You can find us wherever you can find your favorite
1
podcasts.
star. They disrespected A Bug's Life.
That's right. His name is Dan. Mine is Ty. Go on out to our website, solidverbal.com. Sign up for the newsletter. For now, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. We'll be back next Wednesday. In the meantime, stay solid.
Peace.